All right. Pretty high tech here, Jan. I'm way better at this than I am at my catechism class. I did it all Zoom last night. It takes me like 10 minutes to get in. It's awful, and I'm the one that has to run it. All right, so we're on lesson 4. We're going to be talking about voting, soldiers, and suing. So introduction. What are the obvious signs that we're in the election season? Robocalls. A lot of mail. Debates. Signs in the front yard. And it's interesting, the signs that are in Racine are different than the signs when you get outside of Racine. Yep. Okay, what else? Yeah. Social media, podcasts, if you listen to those kind of things. Commercials on TV. Yeah, I don't watch network television, but I don't know, it may have been a sports thing on while I was reading a book and watching the different commercials for the president. And both sides do it is they use grainy images, black and white, for the one that they're against, and then the real bold, vibrant colors for the one that they're promoting. Oh my goodness. It doesn't even matter what they say, it's just the images. So here's an obvious sign too. A farmer who had Trump flags flying from his combine finds out his combine, 2 semis, and a tractor on fire in his field. Yeah. A couple days ago, I gave you a couple of the news sites that I read, the Federalist and Discern, and then another one is Not the Bee, because there's the Babylon Bee. Not the Bee is stuff that sounds like satire, but it's not. And this is one of those things you would think is satire, but it's really true. Okay. And this is an example of that we're in the election season, unfortunately. This year, yes. So on what basis do you cast your vote? Galatians 6:10. So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, and especially to those who belong to the household of faith. So on what basis do you cast your vote? Okay. Qualifications of the candidates based on your beliefs. Okay, they align themselves with what you feel is God-pleasing. What else? The reason I chose that verse is that a lot of times when we vote based on what's best for me. And we need to look at what's best for all people, especially, Paul says, to the household of faith, to Christians. Okay, I know someone in my family that he will vote all the time for one party because he's been told that because he's in the union that the one political party is going to take away your retirement and all this other stuff. And, so he votes that way. And so then I talked to his wife about it, and his wife says, oh, I just vote the way he does because otherwise we go and cancel our votes out, and that doesn't make any sense. Oh my goodness. That's not how you vote. But okay, but you can't vote out of fear. All right, how can the 4th through the 8th commandments guide you in the voting booth and as a citizen? So I didn't put in commandments 1 through 3 for the voting booth. Why? They don't pertain, because those are love for God. Okay, we may take our love for God and apply that to ourselves, but that's not going to apply to those whom we vote for. What about, why not put 9 and 10 in there? About coveting. And that's in someone's heart, right? So we're going to look at each of these commandments. And you're going to get this first because you may have already voted if you went to early voting, but we have another week or so before the election. And then the other Sunday morning class, they're going to get this after they voted. But it's still a good reminder for us. So the fourth commandment, honor your father and mother, that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy a long life on the earth. What does this mean? We should fear and love God, that we do not dishonor or anger our parents and others in authority, but honor, serve, and obey them and give them love and respect. How can you take the fourth commandment into the voting booth with you? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, we may disagree strongly with them, okay, but we still have respect for them. Martin Luther in his large catechism says, for all authority flows and is propagated from the authority of parents. So the key is that the fourth commandment is the source of all human government. There is a state because a state and a federal government because God has placed them over us. And so we respect them. That mean we don't always agree with them. We're going to look in a couple of weeks about resistance, which is an interesting concept for us as Christians, especially because we live in America and then we have the right in our own Constitution to resist. Okay, but we still are respectful and we never rebel. Larry.
Well, this is the kind of the issue that we're in right now. You're talking about a father and a mother for starters.
Mm-hmm.
And in today's society, that doesn't seem to be that important. I would be looking at candidates that promote the family.
Yeah.
One of the big problems, which isn't ever talked about by liberals especially, is the breakdown of the family. And you hear some of that talked about in conservative circles. But I've listened to guys talk about that, and that's one of the big problems.
Mm-hmm.
In today's society, that other problems emanate from.
Right.
You start there, and then the rest of it falls apart. And you can look at, like, I think you mentioned it last week, the Black community. 70% of Black kids are born out of wedlock.
Right.
No family.
Right. And exactly, that's where I was going to go next before we move on to the fifth commandment is that family. It starts with the family. And so, yeah, taking into the voting booth those who are going to promote the family. Back in July when we were supposed to have training camp, and I've been a part of training camp, a camp for third through ninth grade kids. I've been a part of it for 22 years. And then this year we didn't do it, except I made the joke that, well, if we don't have camp, because when I said this, I thought for sure we're having it. We'll just do it one day in my backyard. Well, that's what we ended up doing. Having 36 kids and 10 teenagers helping in my backyard and so forth. And I had shared, and I shared it on Facebook, that the kids don't have to social distance because we're going to be playing games and stuff. They don't have to wear masks. And someone thought that I was, thankfully they didn't say it on Facebook, but they talked to me personally. They thought I was thumbing my nose at the governor and so forth. And I said, no. This is where I was going to bring us up with Larry, is it's the parents' responsibility. They know what's best for their children. We should take responsibility for us and our kids. We know what's best. And it starts with the family. And then it goes from there to the family, then to the local leaders. For me, the village president and council. For you, maybe you, the Racine mayor and council. Then to the governor and legislature in Wisconsin and so forth. But it starts with the family. The fifth commandment, you shall not murder. What does this mean? We should fear and love God, that we do not hurt or harm our neighbor in his body, but help and befriend him in every bodily need. So how does the fifth commandment pertain to you when you go into the voting booth? Abortion. Life issues, right? Okay, law and order. That's good. Want law and order. But I think the main thing is that life issues. You've heard this because it's been around for a long time. Quality of life. Why is that such an awful phrase? And we may even use it. Quality of life. I want to make sure that I have a quality of life when I get older. Why is that an awful thing to think about? Yeah. Who determines? The Bible never mentions a quality of life. God says life. All life is important, because what happens when we start talking about quality of life? What kind of issues stem from that? Because everything rolls. What happens? Well, look at the beginning of life. Abortion. Because a mother might say, well, my quality of life is diminished because I'm pregnant and I can't go to college, or I can't get my dream job. Because you have actresses and so forth saying, Stevie Nicks, we discovered that last week. Stevie Nicks said that she had all of her fame because she had her abortion. There was an actress at the Academy Awards last year that said the same thing. She was glad she got an abortion, so now she's got this stardom. Okay, quality of life. But then you have the quality of life of, well, this child has Down syndrome or autistic or other issues, is born with a heart defect. You know, my niece just celebrated her 18th birthday the other day. She was born missing half of her heart. Okay? And so quality of life, and the womb might say, abort her, right? How about end of life? How does that phrase, quality of life, so dangerous?
I have a problem with quality of life. In a nursing home, and you're breathing, you're just sitting there in this chair, you have no idea what's going on, or anything, and you're sitting in it, and they do everything for you. I don't want to go there.
Right. But the issue is, and then that leads to euthanasia, right? To take someone's life. I go to nursing homes too and see those, and those people, and I cringe because I minister to them, and I don't want to end up like that. And yet, I always remind people. So we had a dear, sweet lady that I buried a couple of years ago, and she was living with her daughter and son-in-law, and she said, "Oh, Pastor, I'm such a burden to my daughter. I just feel so bad." You know, no, she still had what we might say a quality of life, and yet for her, she felt like she was a burden. And the people you're talking about too can feel like they're a burden. And yet, I told this lady, and I've said this to a number of other elderly people, is if did you take care of your kids? Did you have to change their diaper? Did you have to feed them? Did you have to take care of them like that? Well, yeah, that's my job. I said, now the fourth commandment says, this is your children's job to take care of you. And they might have to change your diaper. They might have to feed you. They might have to do everything for you. And in that way, they are honoring their father and mother. And it goes well with them because now they're doing what God has given them that vocation to do. I know I've got a couple of members who, you know, one of the married couple are staying at home, have given up their job to take care of a parent. Okay? Yeah. And to me, what a wonderful example of a child's love for a mother or father to be able to care for them.
What do you think about those extreme conditions where, you know, orphans being kept alive or sick?
Right. Right. And with those issues, we don't have time to get into all of that. But the key is, I always teach people is, because I go to the hospital sometimes and people say, "Oh, Pastor, we turned off the machines." And I can't say anything at that point, but I always wonder, and this is why I teach it over and over again in youth and adult catechism classes. And when it comes up like this, I say, don't ever enter into something like that lightly. Take time. Talk to your family, talk to the doctors, talk to the pastor, pray about it. There's no rush with something like that. And the big thing is, I always try and summarize it is, what is God saying to you? Is God saying, I want, say, Dad, home with me in heaven, and you're just keeping him alive? Or I want him on earth with you, and you're trying to send him to heaven? And that should never enter into lightly. There's all kinds of examples I can use, but the key is, with this example, is we need to take life issues into the voting booth. You know, Dave brought up the life issues of protection, justice, but just life issues of, we want to protect life, because mothers, your mothers, what is your number one role when you have that child in your arms? What's the first feeling that you have as a mom? Yeah, you are the nurturer, right? Your job is to love them. Dads, what is our job?
Wake up every morning and it's like headache every day, or this person there, to the point where you know, it's not waking up in the morning anymore. That's called, that's a, you know,
Right.
a definition of quality of life too. You artificially keep that person going, thinking, you know, 100 years ago, this equipment wasn't available. That person probably would have died and then, you know, maybe glad to go. But now, we can go on our way to try to keep people alive. They're taking 20 pills a day, and they're doing this and that, and it's like, maybe it's supposed to go.
Well, and like I said, we'll talk about this more in depth another time, but the key is, the Bible doesn't speak about quality of life. It talks about life, and all life is precious. But the example I was having with moms, your job as a mom is to protect life. You are the only one of the two sexes to be able to give birth and give life. And so your job is to give life and then nurture that life. And dads, our job is to protect that life. Okay? And that's what we have to remember when we go in the voting booth. The sixth commandment, you shall not commit adultery. What does this mean? We should fear and love God, that we lead a pure and decent life in words and actions, and that husband and wife love and honor each other. Why is that an important commandment to remember when we go into the voting booth? Okay, gay rights. But even before gay rights, the reason gay rights came up is why? It's because of the breakdown of the family. Because we have no fault divorce. We have weakened what marriage is all about. Now, laws aren't going to force people together. And so, again, this goes back to the fourth commandment of family. We need to be building up our young people in a school like what we have, so that we can, the devil plays the long game. You know, he's used from the 60s on to break down the family. We need to remember we ought to do the same thing with, not with laws, but with church and schools and things like that, and families, and build up those families. And that starts with the sixth commandment.
Going into the election booth, and you don't really know what these people have done. You know, like Biden is 78 years old. He's happily married. You know, all straight. Complete fidelity with his wife. You know, Trump did it.
Yeah.
3 times. If you were going to use this criteria, you wouldn't vote for Trump. You vote for Biden. Bible, then we know for sure that Trump has.
But I'm not talking about, we got a question about that to that point, but I'm not talking about the candidates themselves. I'm talking about their policies. Okay. It's the seventh commandment, you shall not steal. What does this mean? We should fear and love God, that we do not take our neighbor's money or property or get it by dishonest dealing, but help him to improve and protect his property and means of income. So there we want to take into account, what is this politician's view on, say, taxes? I added this one today because I figured you guys are big 50-cent rapper fans. Yeah. So rapper 50 Cent endorses Trump last Biden tax policy. I don't want to be 20 cents. Okay. And he was ripped on social media, on Twitter, because that's what Twitter's for, is just rip on people. He was ripped for being selfish, of wanting to keep his money. But he understood that in the article is that what he read, and so this is from him, not from me, he's saying, I would have to give up 62% of my income because I make over $400,000. Okay, that's not being selfish. That's wanting to understand that you and I, personal responsibility, we can do better with our money than an entity does. Okay, and so remember that when we go in the voting booth. And the last one is the eighth commandment. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. What does this mean? We should fear and love God, that we do not tell lies about our neighbor, betray him, or give him a bad name, but defend him, speak well of him, and take his words and actions in the kindest possible way. Here I would think of just applying that whole innocent before proven guilty. Another Twitter thing that I read yesterday is, because I know you guys know who Chris Pratt is. He's from the whole Marvel universe of Guardians of the Galaxy. And he was lambasted on Twitter because he did not engage in a video to support Biden and Kamala Harris with the other Marvel actors. Okay, so no, he didn't say one way or another whether he was for Trump or Biden and so forth, but people assume because he wasn't there for Biden, then he must be for Trump, and they just hammered him. And then they said the same thing about other black actors in the Marvel universe and using really awful racial derogatory terms. Okay, that's not keeping the eighth commandment. Eighth commandment is, the way I remember it, is putting the best construction in everything. Yeah. So one candidate is for lower taxes, decreasing prescription costs, and smaller government, but supports abortion and assisted suicide. The other candidate is for the exact opposite. Discuss how you make a decision on whom to vote for. You're getting older. I am too. I like lower taxes. Someday I'm going to need prescription medicine. That's why I don't go to the doctor, because they'll tell me I have to do stuff. I like smaller government. So those would be things that might be good for every one of us here. So on what basis do we make our vote? Okay.
I always felt that anytime you have a candidate for abortion and assisted suicide, they have no regard for life. You really think that they're going to follow through, and yet, of course, it's going to be a matter of time before they just flip-flop or they're just giving lip service.
Okay.
That's just my opinion.
Anyone else want to add to that? Because I agree wholeheartedly with Ken. I understand when I made this question up, there's no person that really believes this. But for the sake of the argument, I wanted to get to, it is life. And that is, I think for us as Christians, that number one issue. I heard Matt Walsh the other day saying that, and again, this isn't me saying, but he said it, is that Christians cannot vote for Biden for this one issue. He said, it doesn't mean you have to vote for Trump. That was his big point, and that's what I make clear. He said, it doesn't mean you have to vote for Trump. You can not vote or not vote for anyone else or vote for someone else. But the key is it's all about life issues. And I think in that way, because we're Christians, we can be a one issue person just because, and again, it's not because the Republicans are for life and Democrats are not. It's for that person or that party at one point seems to be for life, and life carries over with everything else. Who do most people vote for? The one who runs on the platform of us being responsible, or the one who hands out more free stuff? And why?
They want to work for the city, and so I'm sure this is the rest. But I would like to find out where because people don't want that. A lot of them are speaking out, and he said he was going to go.
Okay. But this is the key, isn't it? It's all about, free college tuition, free insurance, free health care. It's all about who can give out the most stuff. And that's why I have this one. If you were a child, would you vote for mom or dad? Mom is running on a platform of fruit and oatmeal for breakfast. Dad is running on a platform of peanut butter cups and soda for breakfast. Yeah, dad. And isn't that the way it is when you really listen to what the politicians say, all the way from the smallest politician on the school board up to the president? It's all about handing out stuff. And it might be handing out peace and safety. It might be about handing out tax breaks. It might be handing out, making the rich pay their fair share, whatever it is. And it's all about handouts. And we gotta be people really listen closely.
Unfortunately, what you said about this, I think that there are way too many people that have not been raised with the fact that you have to work hard. This is part of life, and that give it to me free, I don't have to work. Unfortunately, there's getting to be more and more of those types of people
Right.
in my small mind.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. I had this conversation yesterday with my catechism students. We were talking about working hard, and I said, I am cheap. You guys know, if you haven't been around for me for a long time, you know I am cheap. But I said, my daughter's maybe even cheaper than I am, because they all have jobs and they get paid pretty well, $10 or more an hour. And yet when we go out to eat, if they're paying for their meal and they're going up and stuff, they don't want to go to Culver's and get a big meal or whatever, because they just worked over an hour for that one burger. Dad, let's just go home. If you're going to make me buy, I'm going to go home, and Dad, you can make us burger there. Okay, they don't go shopping online or at Kohl's or whatever. They go to Value Village on the weekend when it's 50% off, because they've worked for their money. And one of the things Shelly and I just told them is, as Lydia is a senior and she's going through her economics class at Shoreland, she realized, how much taxes are. And that's why I have always told her, and Shelly mentioned this, is that's why you keep working for the member whom you work for, because she's not taking out the taxes. Okay. And so that's a huge thing. And I always tell people too, if everyone had to pay taxes like I pay taxes, which is quarterly, I have to write a big check every quarter, our tax rate would not be so high. If you had to write out a check for 20 to 25% of your income, we'd have a lot lower taxes. But when it's just taken off the top, it doesn't really matter.
Yes, can get so much stuff free in Denmark, but we do 70% of our dollars.
Oh my goodness.
It'd be like we're injured, we could get a free car from the government and have all the bells and whistles or whatever we have. But everything, you know, everything you get a lot of things.
Oh, wow. 70%. I found this question and I thought this is just so important. Why is it important to remember these two things when voting? You're not voting for a pastor. You're not voting for a Messiah. So let's talk about the first one. When you go to vote and say you're voting for president, you are not voting for a pastor. Why is that important? When you vote for, say, Biden or Trump.
What the Republicans or the Democrats are going to do, not for the man.
Right, because what's the problem with either one of those men, for example? Because there's qualifications for a pastor in Scripture and so forth. Yeah, they would never make it.
He wouldn't be able to read it.
Right, and that's the thing I've heard people say, well, I can't vote for this person because this president because of these moral issues. But Larry mentioned this too, is if you look at any one of the, well, not any, that's unfair. If you look at a lot of the people that we have had as president, they've had definitely moral failures, okay? And yet we think some of those guys with the moral failures are some of our best presidents, not because of who they are, but what they did and how they led us through a war or through a crisis or to get us to the moon and all that kind of stuff. So it's important to understand we're not voting for a pastor where there's qualifications that says this is what you have to be up in that pulpit. There's no qualification like that to stand behind that presidential podium. Why is it important to understand you're not voting for a Messiah? Okay.
Freedom, but in this sense, salvation's not going to be dependent upon their
Okay, yeah, not based on your salvation, but even it's important for us to remember it's not so much the salvation of our nation or our state or our city. Because what is the issue I think a lot of people have is, well, if you get this guy in or this guy or this lady in office, well, now we're just going to go downhill really quickly. But then remember, no, he's not the Messiah. Jesus is the Messiah. He's going to work things out no matter what. It is hard. But when we have that in the back of our minds and we go, well, I'm going to cast my ballot and, you know, I might be disappointed on the day after the election. And then we just go on because God's in control. So I used that example yesterday too with Lydia and Belle running cross country this weekend. You know, they got a good chance. They're picked to finish third and the top two teams go to state. So they have a chance if they all run really well to go to state. Well, if they don't do it, there's going to be some tears. And yet, by next week, when they move on to the next sport or they go to work, well, all right, that disappointment's over. I wish we would have done that, but we move on. And that's what we need to remember, too, when voting is, we may be disappointed that our person didn't get elected. Oh, well, God's in control. He's going to do what he's going to do. All right, so that's the politics thing. Let's look at military. Why might a Christian be troubled about being involved in the military or going to war? Great. Yeah, because war involves killing. And oftentimes, as hard as we might try, the innocent can be killed. And that would be in conflict with us as Christians in the Fifth Commandment. Luke writes, then some soldiers asked him, John the Baptist, and what should we do? John replied, don't extort money and don't accuse people falsely. Be content with your pay. soldiers were among the converts who came to be baptized by John the Baptist. John did not tell them that they could not be soldiers if they became Christians. What did he tell them that they should do? Be content. Yeah, do your job. Be respectful. They, as Roman soldiers, they had the right to extort money. They could make someone, as a Jew, here, you carry my stuff for a mile, and so forth. And yet, John doesn't say you need to stop giving up being a soldier now that you're a Christian. He says, no, just be a good soldier. Be a Christian soldier. So why isn't being a soldier inconsistent with being a Christian? Okay. God uses Christian soldiers. What else? Yeah. Yeah. You are God's servant. And that's the whole reason why we as a congregation, it's the first time that we've done this since I've been here, where we're going to honor those who have served God and nation in the military. And that's the way I phrased it last Sunday. And we've got 13 people already that have filled those out. So that's pretty cool, of the men and women in our congregation who have served the military. And they are serving, that's their vocation. Jesus, when he dealt with the Roman centurion, he didn't tell him stop being a Roman centurion. He commended him for his great faith as a soldier. Peter, when he goes to the home of Cornelius, who was a centurion, and Cornelius was converted. Cornelius continued to live as a soldier. The reason I bring this question up in here is because I served our military men and women almost for 8 years in Kentucky at Fort Knox. And there was a gentleman that had come to our church and then taken the classes and became WELS. And shortly after he became a member and as a soldier, he came in about a month or two later and he was really upset. I think it was other guys in his unit were saying, how can you be a soldier and be a Christian? And he was just, because he was new. He had no idea how to do this. And so we talked about this, went into this kind of a Bible study. And I said too, Romans 13:4, God says the government is there as the sword to punish those who do nothing. You are the tip of the sword, I told him. And that calmed his conscience. But that is a difficulty that our soldiers have, is that they have to, well, that goes to this next question. How does Luther's explanation of the Eighth Commandment, we should fear and love God, that we take our neighbor's words and actions in the kindest possible way, guide a Christian if he is not sure the government's reasons for going to war are completely honest? Okay. Yeah. This is tough. I remember having this discussion too when I was down in Kentucky, because those soldiers may have been called up to go into war with Iraq. That was after 9/11, to go over into Iraq and so forth. And so we had a couple of weeks of Bible study on the just war theory. Is this war just or unjust? And some were saying that they think it's unjust, but the majority said it was just. But still, with this question is we need to do the best we can and then trust our government that they're making the right decision. But what if it's unjust? Professor Deutschlander wrote this in his book. He said, the blood is on their heads and hands, not ours. That may be a cold comfort on sleepless nights, right? But it's on them. But then I added that's why we need to have counseling for our soldiers. Candy Rothering, who served in the Navy, and now she serves in a number of different areas now too, in Legion Halls and so forth. And she's the one that's organizing what we're doing for our veterans for Veterans Day. She mentioned to me that 22 soldiers commit suicide every day. Right?
When they have to go over there and for most people, it's against their nature to kill somebody.
Right.
And it's very difficult to deal with that, even though you're defending your country, and you're protecting your, and if you don't shoot them, they're going to kill you. So you're trying to preserve yourself. But it's very difficult to come to terms with having to kill somebody when your whole life you've not ever been involved in that. It's just this constant turmoil. And when you have to shoot women and children because other countries don't value life and they have strap-ons on kids. Well, who? I mean, you couldn't. How do you do that? But if you don't do that, then you're going to be dead, and your fellow soldiers are going to be dead.
Yeah, and so we're going to talk about that, of how to talk to a young person thinking about going to the military, one of our application questions. But exactly what Paul is talking about is exactly why people will struggle with this. And that example you brought about the child, there's a really good movie on Netflix on war, and in there it's a sniper is watching as he's protecting his soldiers coming down, and there's a woman and a child that are coming towards the soldiers, and then the sniper sees this child has a bomb strapped to him. He is going as a 10 or 12-year-old kid going towards them. And so he has to take down that child. So, and then later on, he sees another child that is holding a gun, a big assault rifle, and he's wondering if he needs to take him. He's watching, and then he's just picking up the gun, and then he puts it down again and leaves. But those are the kind of things our soldiers have to live with, and that's why they suffer from PTSD. And that's why when, say, Miriam is in, she'll be going into the military, Lord willing, in a few years, it's so important that our WELS military services have their names so that they can keep sending them materials. WELS, they'll send them the Forward in Christ and the meditations, devotions, and email, and I'll stay in contact and so forth, because it can't always go to a chapel, and especially because they're not going to have any WELS chaplains. But to be able to still participate, and now having the virtual worship services part of, so that they are not separated from God and His Word for all these years. The last thing I want to talk about is suing. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 6, if any of you has a dispute with another, dare he take it before the ungodly for judgment instead of before the saints? Do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if you are to judge the world, are you not competent to judge trivial cases? But instead, one brother goes to law against another, and this in front of unbelievers. Just hear what he's saying is, in the city of Corinth, these Christians were suing each other instead of dealing with it as brothers. And then the unbelievers, the heathens, they're seeing this. That's his point there. So Paul was upset that the believers in Corinth were suing each other. When Christians pursue legal action, especially against other Christians, what message might that send to the world? This isn't talking about just suing in general. This is about Christians suing each other. We'll talk about the world in a little bit. What might the world think about us? Well, I think this is more like this. These are people all in the same congregation. So, like, if I bought a car from Dave, and I trusted him, and I didn't get it checked out or anything, and I trusted him, and now it's a lemon. And then, so what do? I take him to court to get my money back. Well, how does that look? How does it look for the rest of the congregation? How does that look to the community? It looks like we're all about greed, whether it's Dave's greed for fleecing the pastor, or whether it's the pastor's greed because he wants money that's not due him. And that's what his point is, that we're not, as Christians, just trying to get what comes to us. All right? So we got to be careful how this looks in society. And yet, because his reputation as an apostle and his work as a missionary was at stake, Paul made use of his right as a Roman citizen to appeal to the highest court, the imperial court in Rome. What factors would weigh in your decision whether or not to use your rights to pursue legal action? So this isn't talking about like members of the congregation, but just you feel wronged, and the only way that you feel that you can be righted is to take this person, this company, the government, whatever it is, to court. Yeah, that's what Christians, that's how Christians deal with it. But now it's beyond that, because this is dealing with, maybe non-Christian entities. Mm-hmm. No, Jen.
God has allowed us to be able to do that. So I think we're using your Christian privilege, so to speak. If you really feel something's been wrong, let's see what can they do for you. Not that you're out there policing anybody, but let's see what any kind of corrective action.
Right. So is it a matter of protecting my family, my personal safety, my job, or my means of support? Am I being unjustly charged and need to defend myself and my reputation? That's why Paul does this. Is it over something important, or is it trivial? Is it important to me for a God-pleasing reason? Will it make me look vengeful or like a greedy pagan? So I got to think of all those things. Not saying it's right or wrong, because there are instances where we can do it right. In fact, our Lutheran confessions say a Christian may use an office of the government against wicked people without violating his conscience. Private revenge is forbidden, but public redress through a judge is not forbidden, but expressly commanded, and it is a work of God according to Paul. So I've got some examples of cases that are being brought up right now. So attorney for Kyle Rittenhouse, so we know him, he's the young man down in Kenosha. Attorney for Kyle Rittenhouse to sue Biden for libel after campaign video labels his client as a white supremacist. Why would Kyle Rittenhouse's attorney take Vice President Biden to court? Yeah. To protect your good name, his good name. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or here's, these are ones I found this week. The owner of a Palmyra, Pennsylvania Italian restaurant who defied Governor Tom Wolf's COVID-mandated business shutdowns just won a significant victory in court. In May, Taste of Sicily co-owner Mike Mangano was ordered by the state to remain shuttered, but decided instead to open up completely. And then so he was being fined and so forth, and the courts just found him not guilty. Okay. And there he sued the government because he was going to lose his business. He would lose the means of protecting his and providing for his family. Here's one. I didn't print the article. Yeah. Here's another one. State prosecutors have dropped charges against a Michigan barber who refused to close his doors past the 28-day limit of emergency orders afforded to Governor Gretchen Whitmer in the state constitution. The Supreme Court sent the case back to the Court of Appeals with Justice David Viviano cautioning them to not let the rule of law become yet another casualty of COVID-19. Now, that was a pretty good quote. Just because you're afraid of this virus doesn't mean you can just suspend the law. Or this one, this is kind of interesting. Disney takes on California government over lockdowns. Okay, because the government, Disney is really far left, and yet they are going against a really far left governor. Disney points out in this statement that they have been able to safely open parks around the world, and yet that they have looked at the science to determine their own safety protocols. So they're saying Disney World's open, all of our other places in France and China or wherever they have their places, those are all open, and yet California won't let us open. And so they are suing the governor. All right, application. Joe is considering serving in the military after high school. How can you encourage him in his decision with Scripture, and what warnings might you also give him? Did you notice the name I picked, G.I. Joe? Okay. So how might you encourage him? Yeah, protecting our country, that's an honorable thing. This is something I remind people of all the time, and I talk to our young people. So when I talk to our 8th graders and 7th graders, I talk to our high schoolers, and because everyone feels they have to go to college, and I'm reminding kids, you don't have to go to college. I kind of go against the parents to think about just working for a while. Think about the military, even if it's only for a couple of years. I love what Israel does. Their young people, every single one, men and women, have to serve, I think, 2 years in the military. What does that do? Well, they become much more conservative in their thinking because it's not handed to you. You're earning it. You're working for it. You're protecting your nation. And then you're not burning the flag. You're not, kneeling and all this stuff for the, all of that.
I think it's a good idea because they've never been exposed to discipline
Yeah.
and structure, and you have to do it. And you find out, like everything isn't given to you, like mom and dad have done everything for you. Now you're held responsible, and if you don't do whatever you're watching for, so there's consequences.
Right.
And they come out, and it's amazing the difference after even serving, after basic training.
Right.
How this child is, all right, there's hope for.
And that's what I told Miriam, and I encourage the other girls too. At least, go to college, think about ROTC, because they'll pay for your college. And you have to give up a few years. Miriam's going to be 10 years because she wants to be flying helicopters. I always joke at, think of these pilots like 6 foot and Miriam's 5'3", and she'll come out as a second lieutenant from college and them saluting her way down here. But I talk to Miriam about it all the time is you're going to get a job, any job you want after you get your agricultural engineering degree and you are in the military, you know how to take orders and then you know how to give orders. You're going to have that discipline. Any person, any company you want to work for, they want you. But that's going to be the same for a lot of young people in the military. What warnings might you give, Joe? Yeah. Seek help. Yeah, Miriam and I were just talking about this the other day about the army of one that used to be a phrase, their slogan. Not anymore. And I don't know why that is. And I said, because soldiers felt you had to do it alone. And you can't. You have to reach out for help for your spouse, to the rest of your family, to your pastor, your congregation. And that's why, because we talked about PTSD. They're going to have it, and we need to be able to minister to them. They're going to have these issues. And so, yeah. Yeah. Fred and Betty were violently attacked and robbed. The criminals were caught. What will Fred and Betty need to consider about testifying in court, seeking restitution, and even punitive damage from the criminals? Okay, forgiving. And yet, why might it be important for them to press charges? To press charges. Yeah, so you get medical bills paid. Yeah, get them off the street so they don't do it again. Because how guilty might you feel if you let them go and then they go and do the same thing to someone else? Yeah. Yep. To learn your lesson. And like Jamie said, you can offer them forgiveness. One of the videos I show in my 7th grade catechism class when it comes to this is a video from I think it was last year, where a female police officer shot and killed a black man who she thought was in her apartment. And now, she was on trial for not for murder, but for something close to that, not first-degree murder. And the video I show is the younger brother forgiving her and then asking the judge if he could go down and hug this officer. And the judge said no, and then yes, and then that's the video. And the brother even gives this police officer his personal Bible so that she can read it every day in prison. Okay?
In that case, it was an accident. She didn't go into there thinking and wanting to kill somebody. So it was a tragic, whatever she had worked all these hours with that, whatever, and she actually thought. So it was a horrific accident.
Right.
That she did that. And it's different if somebody does something to you on purpose.
Right.
If they come and attack you. And I know just in my own case, I think I just, do whatever you can possibly do, the most that you can do. I was just,
Right.
And now I haven't come to, I'm working on that. I'm being able to forgive.
Yeah.
I will never forget.
Right. Yep.
And that's very hard.
It is hard. You're right.
When it's
Exactly. I use the story too of, I won't use that story. But that's exactly it is hard to forgive. And that's where when we point to God, that he forgives and forgets. He removes our sins as far as the east is from the west. But we want to get to that point, but it may take years. And I told a story too of one of our members, newer members that went through adult confirmation class. Her sister was murdered when she was a teenager. Okay, but it took that lady, who's about my age, it probably took her 30 years or more to be able to work through that forgiveness. Okay, same thing. We talked about it in adult confirmation classes. That the guy who was caught and who murdered, he's probably in prison for the rest of his life, and he got his just punishment, and yet I think she was able to eventually forgive him. Okay. Well, you in your heart will want to give them forgiveness, even though they may not ask you for forgiveness. They may not ever say that, but you have to eventually get to that point to be able to forgive. Right. Yeah. That person, the murderer, may not ever repent, so you can give them the unlocking key. But I think it's important for you to be able to have that, being willing to give the unlocking key. It's around your neck. You're ready to give it because you have that forgiveness in your heart, knowing that We killed the son. We dragged him out of the vineyard. That was last week's sermon. We killed the Son of God, and yet God forgave us. He sent the Son back into the vineyard to love us. And that's what we want to do.
Yeah, the offender is never going to, I can only say in my case.
Yeah.
Never admit.
Right.
Never said it so, but every time he did a Lord's Prayer, he forgives us, so I have to forgive him.
Yeah.
And so, it's just
It's hard, isn't it?
very hard.
Yeah.
And because I know that when I write this letter and say that, it's for my good, not for his, because he doesn't feel he's done.
And that. Thank you, Paula. That's exactly. It's for your good. That's exactly it.
Sometimes doing that forgiveness can change that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Right. So last couple of things here. Again, this is a discern headline. Facebook deletes page of Christian ministry working with those with same-sex attraction, gender dysphoria. So you're a Christian. What would you do if you're part of the Restored Hope Network? And Facebook deletes your page because they feel that you're being discriminatory. You just suck it up? No. And this is what I'm getting at is, as Christians, we still can use the government to our advantage to go up against something like Facebook here, because we need to reach out to this in this type of ministry. This is something that's going to be happening all the time with Christian adoption agencies, different Christian organizations, that they're going to try to demonetize you on social media. They're going to try and come after you and so forth, and then to use the legal system to our benefit. Not to be malicious or anything, or to win millions of dollars in award settlements, but to be able to do what we need to be able to do. All right, we're out of time. So digging deeper. Other questions for today or other future study? All right, so next week we won't have class. So don't drive all the way up here. Because Thursday and Friday there's no school at Douglas or Shoreland. So Shelly and the girls are going to try and do something. We're trying to figure out what to do. Everything's closed, but we're going to try and get out and do something. And I don't want you guys, you guys are already ahead of the Sunday morning class. I don't want to get too far ahead. You are. All right, let me. No, oh, no. We are not over by a long shot.